Good evening, everyone. Thank you so very much for joining us here tonight. We are gathered here virtually to celebrate the launch of Cattail Skyline by Joanne Epp, published by Turnstone Press. My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator at McNally Robinson Booksellers here in Winnipeg. We're broadcasting tonight from Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Just a few brief housekeeping notes before we get underway. This evening will feature a variety of readings and a conversation with Joanne Epp, hosted by the inimitable Angeline Schellenberg. They'll be speaking for a little while. There'll be some readings interspersed, and following the conversation, there'll be an opportunity for you out there to ask questions of Joanne. So as questions occur to you, please do feel free to just write them in the Q&A box. You'll find that just at the bottom of the screen, right down there, and rest assured you won't interrupt us by entering questions there in any way. I'd also like to point out that you're more than welcome to offer any positive comments or anything you might have to say in the chat. Though our panelists' attention this evening will be on one another, I will be sending them along a copy of the chat afterwards so they can see all the pleasant things that you've had to say over the course of tonight. Copies of Cattail Skyline are available from McNally Robinson Booksellers. As you can see, Joanne very kindly came in just last week and signed a pile of them for us. So you can order them from us either by visiting us in person. You can give us a call, or you can order them online. We deliver locally via courier, and we can also mail out copies both within the city and province, nationally and internationally. So rest assured, one way or another, we will find a way to get a copy of Cattail Skyline to you. That's essentially it from me. So I won't delay this anymore. Right now, I'll just tell you a tiny little bit about the book and then introduce both of tonight's participants. So. In Cattail Skyline, Joanne Epp ventures from open prairie roads into little creek beds, down onto the warm earth of strawberry patches, and far afield to the busy markets of Cambodia, to examine the intimate ways we come to know and experience place. With vivid detail and a sense of quiet reverence, Cattail Skyline captures a myriad of landscapes where every change of season and slant of light reveals something previously unnoticed, and where even the most well-trodden paths hold the potential for new discovery. Born and raised in Saskatchewan, Joanne Epp has published poetry in literary journals, including the New Quarterly, Prairie Fire, and Canadian Literature. Her first book, Eigenheim, which you can see behind me, earned her a nomination for the John Hirsch Award for Most Promising Manitoba Writer. Married with 2 sons, she spent several years in Ontario and now makes her home in Winnipeg. Cattail Skyline is Joanne's second book. Your host for the evening, Angeline Schellenberg, wrote Tell Them It Was Mozart, published by Brick Books, a collection about raising children on the autism spectrum, which won 3 Manitoba Book Awards. In 2019, she published 3 chapbooks and was nominated for the Pushcart Prize. The host of Speaking Crow, Winnipeg's longest-running poetry open mic, Angeline recently launched Fields of Light and Stone, published by the University of Alberta Press. Please join me in virtually welcoming Angeline Schellenberg and, of course, Joanne Epp.
Thank you, John. Hi, Joanne.
Hello.
I'm so excited to be here. I was so happy when Turnstone asked me to join you for this. Your book is about place, and it's kind of like we're making a new place, the online place for Cattail Skyline. So we're going to start with the Cemetery Road Poems, which, unlike the rest of the book, doesn't have its own section. They kind of crisscross the whole book. So tell us about them.
Oh, well, they came out of my walks along a little stretch of road running north from the small Saskatchewan town where I spent my high school years, and where my parents continued to live, where my mom still is. So I went back there at least once a year, and it's one of a few groups of poems in the book that are a result of my revisiting the same place, walking the same path over and over again, and finding that extremely rewarding. It's the sort of thing that as a kid I would have considered boring, but I've learned over the last number of years just how rich an experience it can be to pay that repeated close attention to a place. So yes, as you say, these poems are interspersed through the book. They're between the sections. So it's a bit like they're a bit like a path leading through the book, and the other sections are paths branching off of that main road. So I'm going to read one of those. This one is from closer to the end of the book. This is number 7 of 8. Walking in the afternoon, the sun still high, almost too hot to be out, exposed to the blaze. Green and blue all around, but all you can think of is gold, the way things give off light. Quartz and mica flecks in the gravel, a bird's wing, a waterweed, a beetle's carapace. The surface of the little pond is blinding. Hardly a pond, only a water-filled ditch, but enough to hold the sun and flash it back hard. From a distance, the cemetery's a darkness of trees. You pass through the gate, and inside it's dazzling. Light leaps the tall hedge, shines off granite, off minuscule marble facets. You place a hand on a white stone, a red, a black. Feel how they gather the heat. You've waited for this midsummer, have always loved it, despite days like this when the heat is too much. You step into shade under a maple. Even here, looking out from this shelter, the light's so strong you can drink it. Now I'll read a couple from the first 2 sections of the book, which are all focused on Saskatchewan, either on, well, memories or experiences or revisitings of places I know. Fort Carlton. Everyone knows it's a buffalo rubbing stone, that boulder on top of the hill. This is where the bison came to scratch their behinds, massage their woolly shoulders. Not rough like a tree, but stronger. They could lean hard, rub the itches out. See this, says one of the boys. The ground's hollowed out all around it. That's from their hoofs. You mean hooves, a girl corrects him. We know about glaciers from school. We know they left rocks in odd places. Erratics, the book called them. Eccentrics, strangers amid the grass and willows. This one's chest high on us, rubbed smooth by generations of bison. We hoist ourselves up, feel its warmth beneath us. We pick at the lichen clinging to it, savoring these few things we know. Lanigan Creek, revisited. Down the slope from the road, waist deep in cow parsnip. Thistles rasp my bare legs. Down farther in black currant and nettle, I don't see the horseflies till they bite. Reeds grow thick along the creek where it widens to a pond. 2 killdeer run across the mud flat fringed with green scum. Behind me, a plastic lid flotilla, chip bags, a Slurpee cup wash against a concavity of shoreline. These things did not appear within the frame of memory, but they're here now, like the loud ones at the party, everyone looking sideways, asking who let them in. I keep my eyes on the birds, their stop and start progress across the shining mud. No need for them to raise their gildee alarm call. I'm hemmed in by reeds and willow, far enough away. The town where I was born is quite close to Batoche, and where the bridge crosses the South Saskatchewan River there is known as Gabriel's Crossing. So that's the title of this one. My brother followed me, climbing the riverbank's cut-open face, slipping, kicking back sand spurts. We slid down, scrambled up, slithered and tumbled till feet, hands, clothes were sand brown. The hillside concave, grass and wild roses stripped away, truckloads hauled off for road work, there by the sky blue bridge near the place where Dumont ran the ferry. At school, it was Radisson, not Riel. Vimy, not Fish Creek. Batoche was a Sunday outing. Graveyard, rifle pits, bullet holes in clapboard, battles with losses we could not fathom. We pronounced Gabriel as if it were English. We raided the riverbank to fill our sandbox.
Wow. In case anyone listening thinks that Saskatchewan is boring, change their mind. Why do you love Saskatchewan so much? It just comes through in all these poems.
Oh, why? Well, part of it has to be because it's where I'm from, but that can't be all of it because people don't necessarily like where they're from. I remember liking the landscape where I grew up, that mixed grassland, aspen parkland, from when I was quite young. I told an old farmer, a friend of the family once, that I loved the prairie, and he said that's because I didn't know any better. I do know better now, having lived elsewhere in Canada and having traveled a bit, and I do still love it.
Mm.
One of my very early poems is all about colors, and it's about the different the colors in the different seasons in that landscape.
Mm-hmm. Unlike the man that I heard of, who lived his whole life in Saskatchewan and then moved to BC, and his friend asked him how he liked it, and he said, well, it's okay, but these mountains sure obscure the view.
They do, you know.
Yeah. Mm. So this is more of an observation than a question, but there's so many feelings, like tactile feelings in the poems you just read, like the hot gravestone and the raspy weeds and the biting insects. How do you do that? Like Jocelyn in the chat said she felt like she was there with you, and I did too.
Oh, wow. How do I do that? I don't know. I think my poems have always been pretty strong on the visual side of things, but more recently, I think I've paid more attention to touch and sound and smell too, because yeah, that's the sort of thing I want my readers to get, is that immersive experience.
Mm. And taste. You wrote a poem about soup once. It was sort of torture, but also very tasty. On a more serious note, you address the painful history of settler and Indigenous interactions in these poems. What do you want readers to take away from them?
Well, I feel like I came to this rather late, that it's only very recently I've started thinking about these things seriously myself. And it seemed odd when I first realized this, just how little I knew about what had gone on in the area where I grew up. Because that area around well, the town where I was born is Rosthern, and the area around there is so steeped in history. I mean, Duck Lake, Fish Creek, Batoche, all of that. And I had the vaguest of inklings of that when I was a kid. So it's been a matter of realizing how much I don't know, for starters. I think what I would hope readers would do is take that as a prompt to start thinking about the places where they're from. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned to me that the next set of poems you're going to read is probably your favorite in the collection, the Omens Creek poems, where you look at the same place at different times of year. So tell us why that's important to you.
Why that's important? Well, I think it's part of that close attentiveness that for me, it's been part of getting to know the place better. Is been looking at it at all times of the year and in as many different ways as I can. Yeah, it's become one of my favorite places. For those of you who don't know Winnipeg, Omens Creek enters the city kind of at the northwest corner and eventually flows into the Assiniboine River. It's been redirected quite drastically. There's a signboard in a little park saying the city has not been kind to Omens Creek, and this is very true. But closer to where it flows into the river, there's a patch of restored prairie, and then there's a little ravine and a wooded area before it enters the river. So lovely place to find wildflowers and to listen to birds, and if you're really lucky, to see a muskrat. Mm-hmm. So I have a series of 12 poems, one for each month of the year, and I'm going to read 2 of them, the ones for May and June. And I've got a visual to go with them. Affirmation. The slopes are dull as pavement. Creek's edge dry with last year's cattails. Coffee cups, bright red, faded to brick, lodge in bushes. Wind-blown fast food logos, disguised by dirt and sun bleach, entangle in the yellowed grass. Step sideways, the picture changes. New grass threading up through the old. Willow twigs bursting with leaves. Rose hips still orange after winter. The advertisement of a blackbird's scarlet shoulders. Tomorrow, neighbors will come with gloves and garbage bags, kick up dust from blades of blue stem. They'll comb out the cardboard and plastic that's drifted in. Push back the boundaries yet again. And I'm also going to read the June poem. Just waiting for the video to start. Plenty. On each stalk, a whirl of long-toothed leaves and a white round-petaled flower. Single, but not alone. Lateral stems underground, an unbroken connection. Multiply anemones, 1 to 2 to 4, a family, a clan inhabiting the moist shade by the creek. On the crest of the bank, under sun, rose bushes bristle together. A pretty tight crowd, but open-handed with their pink blooms, their size, their sweetness. Enough for all the pollen gatherers with basketfuls to spare. Downstream, milk vetch throng beside the path. One taproot grows a multitude, narrow leaflets twinning down each long stalk. Flower stems add purple to purple. Finger flicks of color, little J strokes climb each other up and up, heaping plenty on plenty in this extravagant season.
That's so cool. You read May and June, and we're kind of right on the border between those. I can't wait till the restrictions loosen and you and I can go hunting for flowers in the creek again. Well, not in the creek, beside the creek. I love that line, push back the boundaries once again. What are the boundaries of or between?
Well, not exactly between humans and nature. I don't think that's quite it. But I think, well, I think more between us and some of the stupid stuff we do. Or between the natural world and some of the stupid things we do. I mean, we have this one world to live in, and we have to find a way of living in it that that is life-giving for us and for the other creatures in it. So if we could just put a check on some of the at least some of the petty things we do, like dropping garbage on the ground. At least draw that boundary.
At the very least. Oh. I also love that line, that advertisement of a blackbird's scarlet shoulders. Very interesting that you use the word advertisement or advertisement in this poem, where you talk about fast food logos and discarded advertisements of other kinds. So what statement are you making?
Statement. Well, the red patches on the red-winged blackbird's shoulders are a form of advertisement. It's got to do with asserting territory, I think. So advertising in a certain way is already there in the natural world, but I think in the human world, in human culture, we tend to take it to extremes. And end up shedding a lot of debris along the way.
Yeah. I'd rather have with the blackbird selling. So the next two sections are about train travel and a trip to Cambodia, whereas most of the book is about staying still in one place, notably the Canadian prairies. But those two sections that you're going to read from now are about movement. So how do these movement poems about train travel in Cambodia speak to the rest of the book?
Well, I think they do relate to the themes in the rest of the book. For me, travel by train is an immersion in landscape. For long stretches, the railroad is well away from the main highways, and of course, with the large cities quite far apart in this part of the country, you see a lot of countryside and very small towns. So I tend to spend hours at a stretch just staring out the window, and yeah, it's a rich field for poetry.
I'm always glad when you say you're going on a train trip, because I'm like, ooh, more good poems.
Oh, that's something I'm longing for. But as for Cambodia, I mean, one idea throughout the book, I think, is the idea of how we know a place, how much is possible to know a place and how perceptions can change, how perceptions can be questioned. And I think that's that questioning of perceptions or the question of how well it's possible to know a place really comes to the fore when you're visiting someplace very different from your home country.
Mhm.
Mhm.
All right, take us on a train trip.
Okay, here we go. Progress. Now, for this one, it helps to know that, well, when the railways were built, there were stations established every so and so many miles. And on what was originally the Grand Trunk Pacific Railroad, there are 2 or 3 sequences of towns in alphabetical order. So, progress. The railway runs between fields, beside ponds, under a warm air mass moving east, a pair of parallel lines stitched with cross ties. Along it, an alphabet of settlements, A to Z repeated westward. That was progress, pushing the lines through, planting towns, plowing up land so fast no one thought to enumerate the wheatgrass, June grass, fescue, or knew what was lost through the splitting of roots. Ituna, Kelleher, Lestock, still here. Bangor, Tate, Venn, bypassed when the highways came through. Elroy, Moston, Undora, gone. To us, watching with fresh attention, it's all new. The glare of sun on rooftops, sun on steel rails. This alphabet overlaid on the landscape, its gaps written over with field crops, wild mustard, bindweed, foreign and local mingling on disturbed ground. Daisies and buckbrush nodding in the train's wake. I'm going to try my other glasses for a moment, see if this is a bit better. Nope. One of the annoyances of middle age. Probability. 9 a.m., none in sight. 10:30 on the train, gaining speed through August countryside. It's the whether or not of clouds. A fleet sailing in from the east, shadowing fields of ripening barley. Solid mass on the horizon separates into tufts, a field's breadth between, coming and coming toward us, and we toward them. Probability of rain, yes or no? To the northeast, nimbostratus, the color of denim, ready to wring itself out over clustered rooftops, over the square church, onion-domed, backlit against the oncoming storm. But here, we're still patching our way through sun and shade, the high, low of small clouds, bright white and sunlit above, below, dust-colored, riding heavy over sloughs. A pelican's feathers cloud over, then clear. In the window seat, I open my book and squint in the sudden glare on the page. The Cambodia Poems came out of a trip I took there in the 90s when I was working for Mennonite Central Committee in their government relations office in Ottawa. I made a trip to Vietnam and Cambodia just to get a firsthand look at what MCC was doing there. So met some of the people working there and saw some amazing things. One of the best experiences in Cambodia was when I got to go along with a couple of the workers to a couple of rural villages where they had some reforestation and other community development projects. This is in Tramkak district in Takeo province, south-ish of the capital city, Phnom Penh. Vesak Day is a Buddhist holy day. We happened to be there at the time and went to the temple that evening. So this is Vesak Day in Tramkak. The temple is new, paint still fresh on walls where giant figures play out stories of the Buddha, birth, enlightenment, death, under cool fluorescence flecked with bugs. We sit behind the nuns, all in white, gray hair cut short. Monks in orange-yellow robes, some of them just boys, watch us and smile behind their hands. They'll stay here all night. This is what I was told. Also, the reason the old nuns grin at me, the great joke of my being here, winter pale, not understanding a word. Buddha looks down from his dais, pink and smiling, mounds of flowers at his feet. Boy monks fidget and stare. The women sip jasmine tea as the sermon drones to an end. Musicians wait with practiced stillness, sitting behind xylophones, a circle of gong chimes, stout barrel of a drum. One of them, a blind man, gray-haired and hollow-cheeked, lets a few notes loose. A brief measure and he stops, mallets raised, mumbling his cigarette. Then the signal, whatever it is, comes for real. They all catch it, pick up their sticks, wait a beat, and begin. Waking in Angta Som. Everything's monochrome, silver blue with moonlight. The wooden house on stilts, windows shut against mosquitoes. The wash house with palm leaf walls and clay water jar, the latrine out back. The two pigs lying together, snuffling in their sleep. I crawl out of pink mosquito netting, slip on sandals, pad along the dirt path. Open the door to a squat toilet in spotless white tile. One pig twitches an ear. If I stand very still, there's a possibility of a breeze.
Ooh. I love it. I just want to point out whether or not of clouds is a pun.
Yes, I'm not immune. I do that myself.
I love the Cambodia poems. What was your experience of being a foreigner in a new place?
Oh gosh, it was quite the experience because that was my first trip outside Canada or the US. And I mean, I've been to the US a number of times and gotten the usual remarks about, well, it must be pretty cold up there, and been told my accent was cute. But going to Cambodia was quite a different thing altogether. Partly because it was so new for me, partly because at that time, they didn't get a lot of Western tourists there yet. There were, a certain number of travelers. There were foreign aid workers, but it wasn't that complicated. And so foreigners were scarce enough to be a curiosity. And being light-skinned and light hairs, it was impossible not to be obvious, which for me took some getting used to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But was probably a useful experience.
Yeah, not only for the poems.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to move into the final section of the book, which means start putting your questions in the Q&A. This final series is about a camp that you love. Where is Star Lake and what makes it so special?
Star Lake is in Whiteshell Provincial Park, which is in southeastern Manitoba. So close to the Ontario border, and it's in the Canadian Shield country. So rocks, lakes, and trees.
Mm.
We have been going there. We've been going there since our kids were quite young, and we spend time with a lot of the same people every year. So it's like we've watched each other's kids grow up, and it's another case of learning to see a place closely through growing familiarity, and seeing something new every time I go, despite having gone there over and over again. And just the camp we attend has this interesting mix of long-standing ritual and complete relaxation, which our family likes very much. So this is the final section of the book, and I'm going to read 2 of these poems. Minnowing. They school in the shallows, their slips of shadow following beneath, the lake bottom rippling in sandy waves. When they idle in the water, I reach for the long-handled net, let it swish toward them, then watch them instantly shift out of reach. A test of patience. If the net comes too close, they dart. I keep it almost still, a lazy twitch now and then. A quick dip, and I catch a single minnow, pull it into the air, weightless, a flutter in my hand. I glimpse its silver belly, its round, perfect eye. In greenish water, it was a dart of motion. Now in my cupped palm, it seems made of light, too small to house bones and heart. I want to look closer, but it loses breath the longer I hold it. I dip the net again. The bright thing swims, regains its element, its grace. And the last one, timelines. A brief rasp of aluminum on basalt as we pull up the canoe. Then nothing except our footsteps, tapping on rock, muffled in springing moss, rustling through carpet of bunchberry. It's always quiet at the field station just up the shore, the students spending days up on some outcrop, learning to read these lavas and sediments, their ancient shifts and collisions. Beside us, the centerpiece of this alcove in the cliff, the lichen-crusted slab that once slid down the rock face and now leans against it, leaving a keyhole slit we can't slip through. High up, a black spruce grips a ledge, somehow finds space for roots. Voices ping off the water, the children and teenagers arriving in 2 canoes. Straight to the cliff once they disembark, and in moments one of them finds a path, a steep zigzag up its fractured face. She perches among ferns, bright against the old, old rocks.
So beautiful. I was hoping if you had a lake poem that you'd let me know.
Oh. You just really grown, don't you?
I love it when you groan. It's my love language.
Oh man.
All right. So we have some questions.
Okay.
Sarah Clausen says, you pay such careful attention to the natural world. Does such attentiveness require preparation? Do you begin your walks with an intentional frame of mind, with resolve? Do you take notes? That's a lot of questions.
Oh.
So does the attentiveness require, besides practice, some preparation? And do you begin your walks with the intentional frame of mind to write?
Well, sometimes yes. Sometimes it just kind of happens. I go for a walk, see interesting things, take pictures of them maybe, and then make a poem about it afterwards. But there have been times, like for instance, with the Omens Creek ones, once I realized that I had the beginnings of a series going, I started getting deliberate about going at particular times of year and bringing a notebook and looking more deliberately to see what was there. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're a pretty intentional person. If not for the poems, just for the joy of noticing things, whether or not it leads to words. Dora Dewick would like to know, and I think someone else posted this in the chat as well. Did you write the Cambodia poems then or assemble them later from your journals? And if you did it later, how does distance of time affect observation?
Oh, well, I started writing those poems not immediately afterwards. It was, let me think, a few years afterwards, not terribly long. But then I wrote more of them more recently. Yeah, and based on my photos and journals. The annoying thing about my journals was I would go back to them hoping to find confirmation of a particular detail and find that I had written about everything except that. So yeah, I did rely on memory a fair bit, and for accuracy, I also relied on the internet. For instance, the gong chimes, what exactly was that called? Or in another poem, where exactly was that restaurant? So the internet does make itself useful sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Brenda Scabaris says, did you take the flower photos in Omens Creek? Also, tell me about the title of the book and how it came about.
Oh, yes, those are all my photos. I take more photos of wildflowers than just about anything else. Oh, the title, yes. Well, it's from a line in a poem. One of the early poems in the book is, I read you the poem entitled Lanigan Creek Revisited. Well, this one is called Lanigan Creek. And what I observe in that poem is, well, besides a lot of tiny creatures, the way you go down to a different level when you go below the road and down to the creek side. So there's a line below the Cattail Skyline. So that's where the title comes from.
Mm-hmm. And it was an excuse for a gorgeous blue cover.
Yes.
Love it. The next question is from Sandra Bender, following up on Sarah's question. Do your poems spring more from solo walks, do you find, or is it the same when you walk with your family and or others?
Oh. Probably more from walks alone, just because that's what I tend to do a lot. Anyone who walks with me has to put up with my frequent distractions like, oh, a flower. So
It's not a hardship.
it's less of a walk than a ramble.
Oh, it's like to ramble.
Mm-hmm. Yes, although no, some of them did come out of walks with other peoples. I can think of peoples. Did I just say that? I can think of a couple in particular. So yeah, it depends on the circumstance.
Like the Cemetery Road poem where you bring your brother and your son.
Yes.
Deborah Bowen says, that was lovely. Joanne, so sorry I can only arrive late. Here's my question. Do we miss something by not seeing your poems on the page? Well, of course not, because you're going to buy the book and see it there. I think she means at this moment. Of course, the voice is wonderful, but is the page another medium or dimension that this kind of reading deprives you of?
Oh. Well, well, I'm not sure if I'm addressing your question this way, but I do like reading aloud. I mean, the part that I miss now is not seeing everyone's faces. I do like reading to an audience. Though, yeah, the words on the page, I mean, I don't do a lot of interesting things with form and with visual arrangement of the words on the page. So,
you're very careful with line breaks and stanza breaks, though.
well, yeah.
I've been there with you when you've been humming and hawing.
Oh yes, that's right. You have. Yeah. Okay. You're right. There is that. There is the spacing.
That does come across in the way that you read it too.
Okay. So yeah. So Deborah, if I didn't quite address your question, feel free to come back.
But yeah, you do miss something by not reading the whole book together because of how each section, the poems within it talk to each other, and the different sections talk to one another. So yeah, you have to buy the book. JD Rempel has a couple things here. As an artist, I thoroughly enjoyed your visualization of light. And my question is, how is your work balanced between your emotion or your visualization?
Oh.
I'm not quite sure what that means.
I'm not sure. I mean, as far as, well, as far as emotion goes, sometimes that requires a bit of time and a bit of detachment in order to kind of interpret or filter an experience. Okay, I think I've lost, part of the question has already slipped out of my mind.
Emotion and visualization.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think sometimes emotion does come through in what in the details that I remember most strongly, and the ones that I choose to record in the poems.
Yes.
So it's tied together.
Yeah, but you're very imagistic. You're very into the sensory, like making people feel like they're there with you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I hope that addressed the question.
I think so. All right, I think we have time for one more question from Sally Ito. Thanks, great reading, Joanne, she says. Did you ever meet a plant or animal whose name you didn't like? I ask this as a fellow poetry translator who knows there are different names for flora and fauna in other languages. Oh, interesting.
Well, name, yeah, you know, I have a poem in the Star Lake series that's it's a list of wildflower names that I made into a sort of rhythmic chant, and it's not nearly all of the ones that I've seen there, but it's the ones that would sound good in a poem. I mean, there are some names that I find just peculiar. Like there's a yellow flower called the Hori Pakun. Yeah, or there are some whose names are a bit unmusical, but I'll probably find a way to play with those sometime.
Speaking of names, this isn't a question, it's a comment. And because his name's Timothy and he's your brother, I'm going to read it. We love your poetry. We just ordered your new book. Sammy wants to know when you will write a poem about him, perhaps the chocolate bar incident or the road trip. Love, your brother. There's a challenge for you.
Yes. Sammy is their dog, their little Brussels Griffon.
I love dog poems. You should do it.
Well, that would be a challenge. I've never written a dog poem before.
I've tried.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But it hasn't worked yet?
Well, it's debatable. Okay, well, I think we should wrap it up. So I'm just going to say thank you to Turnstone for inviting me to be here. My mouth is tired from smiling. Thank you to John Taves for coordinating and hosting this. And thank you to Joanne for being awesome.
Well, thank you for being a wonderful friend and a gracious host, and for your rotten sense of humor. And yes, thank you to Turnstone for producing such a lovely book, and to John for running this show. As I said, I only wish I could see your faces, but I look forward to reading everyone's comments in the chat. This has been fun. Thank you all for listening in.
And their congratulatory emails and all the letters that they'll send once they've read your book and loved it. All right, over to you, John.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Angeline. I'm going to keep the gratitude train rolling for just a moment and thank you, Angeline, for your incredible hosting and for establishing that the next time you host an event, we need a rim shot sound generator that can accompany all the jokes and puns. Joanne has written a beautiful book of poetry that is Cattail Skyline, so please do take advantage of its presence here on Earth and seek out a copy wherever you can. I will note once more that McNally Robinson does have many copies, all of which are signed by the author, so please do avail yourself of that resource. Thanks to Turnstone Press for thinking of us and including us in this celebration. It's always such a pleasure to work with them and all the incredible authors that they publish. And thank you all for joining us here tonight, for choosing us over the Jets, choosing poetry over sports. I will point out that this video is being streamed to YouTube, as all the people watching on YouTube will know, and this video will remain up. So if you'd like to revisit it or would like to share it with anyone, please do feel free to do so. It will be on the McNally Robinson Online Events YouTube channel. But in closing, just huge thanks to you all. It was such a pleasure to spend the evening with you. And thank you, Joanne, once again for this book. Have a lovely night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.